I didn't believe it at first. $20 an hour, no experience required. For a job as a tour guide at the Statue of Liberty? Something had to be wrong with it. But when you're desperate, you take what you can get. I wasn't ready for what I was about to find out. The rules? Too dangerous to follow. But I didn't know that yet. I didn't know it at the time, but the click of that job posting was the start of something that would change everything for me. My name's Jordan. A few months ago, I graduated from college, full of hope, optimism, and, most importantly, ambition. I was sure that I was going to find a great job. The world was open to me, right? It wasn't. You know that feeling when you send out application after application, write cover letters, go to interview after interview, and hear nothing back? That was my life. I wasn't special. I was just another college graduate swimming in a sea of competition, all hoping for the same thing. Every day, I'd sit at my desk, refreshing job boards, searching for anything that might stick. But it didn't. Day after day, I got rejection email after rejection email. It felt like a joke. I had qualifications. I had skills. I was ready. And yet, nothing. The bills were piling up, rent was due, and I couldn't remember the last time I felt good about my future. Most days, would just eat stale crackers for lunch, and for dinner, I made whatever cheap pasta I could find at the grocery store. That's how it was. You get used to it. Then came that night. It had been weeks since I'd seen anything promising. But there I was, sitting at my computer, scrolling through yet another list of jobs. Entry-level position, must have 5 years of experience. Another one asked for 10+ years of relevant experience. What does that even mean? It was all the same nonsense. Each job I clicked on felt like a slap in the face. I was about to give up for the night when something caught my eye. The job title alone made me stop. Tour guide at the Statue of Liberty. I blinked at it. $20 an hour. No experience required. Start tomorrow. Something felt off about it. Something I couldn't quite place. But I was desperate. I thought to myself, this is probably a scam, but what do I have to lose? I clicked the listing. The page was simple. Just a short description of the job. No requirements. No qualifications needed. They needed someone to show visitors around the Statue of Liberty. Pay was decent. Honestly, it was the first thing I'd seen in weeks that actually felt like an opportunity. I was skeptical, but I was also tired. I didn't have time for doubt. I had bills to pay. I read the posting again. There were no strings attached. No experience required. You can start tomorrow. I almost clicked away, thinking it was too good to be true. What's the catch? I asked myself. But something told me to take the chance. It wasn't like I had other options. I replied to the ad with my information, figuring there was no harm. As I hit send, I didn't realize how much I was walking into. I waited. A few minutes passed. Nothing. Then the phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a reply from the employer. You're hired. Bus ticket attached. Be at the Statue of Liberty at 7 a.m. sharp. No questions, no exceptions. I stared at the screen, unsure if I'd read it right. No interview. No background check. Nothing. Just, you're hired. I sat there, frozen, staring at the message. I felt a strange feeling creep into my chest. Something wasn't right about this. But I was too far in now. What was I supposed to do? The money was good. It was a chance to finally get out of my rut. I rubbed my eyes. I hadn't slept much in days. Maybe I was just seeing things. I scrolled up and checked the job posting again. Same message. Same offer. Be at the Statue of Liberty at 7 a.m. sharp. I clicked on the bus ticket attachment. A ticket to New York, and on it was the time, tomorrow morning. I stared at the screen. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. Good choice. Be careful. That gave me a chill. I turned my phone off, thinking it was just some prank or a wrong number. But it stuck with me. I stared at the ticket for a while longer, then back at the job posting. I could hear the buzzing sound of my phone on the table. It was too quiet. Everything felt like it was moving too fast. But there was no going back. I sent a quick reply to confirm. I'll be there. The second I hit send, I regretted it. I stood up, pacing back and forth in my apartment, wondering what I'd just done. But the bills didn't stop. Rent didn't stop. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. It was getting late, and I needed sleep. But the bed felt uncomfortable, like it wasn't mine anymore. The whole room felt too small. By morning, I was already on the bus to New York, not entirely sure what I was doing or why I was doing it. The bus ride felt like a blur. I was too tired to care about the uncomfortable seat, the coughing passengers, or the crying baby a few rows back. The hours dragged on, and every stop felt longer than the last. Outside the window, the world changed. The city lights faded away, replaced by open plains and brown hills. The air outside turned dry, and the heat felt like it was sucking the life out of everything. The world was a lot quieter here. No city sounds, no rush of the busy streets. The highway twisted through barren land, stretching far beyond where I could see. I watched as the buildings disappeared in the distance, replaced by miles of scrub and dust. The sky seemed bigger here, but it felt heavy. The hours passed, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When we finally pulled into the terminal, my legs were sore from the long ride. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and stepped off the bus. The heat hit me the second the doors opened. I wasn't prepared for it. The sun was unforgiving. I had a moment to adjust before I noticed something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A man in a dark jacket stood by the bus stop, watching me. He didn't move. Didn't say anything. He was just standing there, staring. I quickly turned away, walking towards the visitor center. There was nothing I could do but keep moving. The Statue of Liberty was supposed to be beautiful, grand, inspiring. That's what everyone says. But when I got there, it was different. The visitor center looked smaller than I imagined. The building itself looked run down, its walls chipped and peeling. The sign at the entrance looked faded, like it had been there forever. It didn't feel like the iconic, majestic landmark I thought it would be. I was supposed to meet someone inside, but the place felt deserted. The door creaked as I walked in, and the first thing I noticed was the quiet. Too quiet. There was no one at the front desk, no employees in sight. The faint hum of air conditioning was the only sound. I looked around, unsure where to go next. Then I heard it. A voice. It was low, muffled, like someone was speaking through a wall. I walked towards the sound, my steps echoing in the empty space. I was about to knock on a door when the voice stopped. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Just then, a man appeared from a hallway. He wore a uniform with the Statue of Liberty logo, his face unreadable. "Jordan?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded. "Follow me." And that's where I was, standing in the middle of a place that was supposed to be a symbol of freedom and history, but felt more like a prison than anything else. The rules were starting to make sense now. The ones I hadn't followed yet. The ones I didn't know if I ever could. The job was only beginning. And I was already starting to wish I hadn't come. I wasn't sure what to expect and I first arrived at Liberty Island. I had no idea that the day would change me forever. When I met Eliza, the manager, I immediately felt something off. Eliza was older than I expected, with short, gray-streaked hair and an unsettling calmness about her. Her eyes, cold and sharp, never left mine as she spoke. She was the type of person who never had to raise her voice to make herself heard. She didn't seem like the kind of person you'd want to argue with, and for some reason, I wasn't eager to do anything to make her angry. She handed me my uniform, nothing fancy, just a plain blue shirt with a logo and a name tag. As we walked toward the main area, she explained the rules to me. But there was something strange in her delivery. "Stay within the designated areas," she said, her voice calm but direct. "Never leave the group. Don't look at her eyes. Never touch the statue." I nodded along, thinking these rules were just some over-the-top cautionary measures. After all, it was a high-profile tourist spot. What could go wrong, right? But the longer she spoke, the more uncomfortable I felt. Her eyes lingered on me a little too long. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, like she was watching me, measuring me. I shifted under her stare, but she didn't blink. "Are we clear on that?" she asked after a long silence. I didn't know what else to say, but, yeah, I got it. I thought I was just being paranoid. I had no reason to feel uneasy, yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that Eliza wasn't just talking about rules. There was something about her tone that hinted at something far more serious. My first tour began shortly after. I wasn't ready for what I'd encounter. As I led the group toward the base of the statue, something didn't feel right. The air felt thicker, as though it were pressing against me. It was as if the island itself was alive, watching. The tourists around me seemed fine at first. But then, as we got closer to the statue, I noticed a woman on the tour who started to look uncomfortable. Her face went pale, her hands started to shake. And then she suddenly burst into tears. I tried to comfort her, but she couldn't explain what was wrong. She just kept saying, "It's the eyes. The eyes. I can't stop looking at them." I thought she was overreacting. But it wasn't the only strange thing that happened. Another man complained of a headache that started the moment he looked at the statue. His face contorted with pain, and he left the tour early. I thought it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I had an uncomfortable feeling that something was off. After the tour, I went to the staff room to grab a break. That's when I met Tom. He'd worked at the Statue of Liberty for years, and he looked like someone who had seen it all. He had a worn-out look in his eyes. Like he had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "You're new, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. "First day." "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, "there's a reason they tell you not to look at her eyes." I froze. "What do you mean?" Tom glanced around, checking if anyone was listening. "If you do, you're in trouble. Trust me. You'll start seeing things. Start hearing things. And it only gets worse. And don't go near the base at night. That's where the bad things happen." I laughed, nervously. I thought he was joking. But there was no humor in his face. "The bad things?" I asked, unsure if he was serious. "Don't say I didn't warn you," he muttered before walking off. I shook my head, dismissing him. It had to be some kind of superstition, right? The Statue of Liberty. This place. It's supposed to represent freedom and strength, not danger. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel like there was more to it than just a historical landmark. Later that afternoon, I gave another tour. By now, I was getting the hang of things. The visitors were calm, asking basic questions about the statue, the island, and its history. Everything seemed fine until I looked up at the statue. It wasn't supposed to be anything strange, but I saw something. A shadow. A flicker of movement on the face of the statue, where there should have been nothing. It was brief, just a fraction of a second. But it was enough to make my stomach twist. I thought maybe it was the angle of the sun or just my eyes playing tricks on me, but then the tourists around me didn't seem to notice anything. They were all busy snapping photos, completely oblivious. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It wasn't just the shadow that unsettled me. It was the feeling, the deep, overwhelming feeling that something was watching me, pulling me toward the statue. I blinked, trying to shake it off. But my heart was pounding now. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. But I couldn't get rid of the sensation. The Statue of Liberty, towering over me, seemed to loom even larger than before. It felt like the eyes of the statue were on me now. I hurried the group along, trying to ignore the unease in the pit of my stomach. The rest of the tour went by without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Days passed, and the oddities only grew. At first, I thought it was just me. Maybe I was just adjusting to the job. But the more time I spent on Liberty Island, the stranger things became. I started noticing subtle changes. Tour maps on the walls of the visitor center shifted. A sign that was one place one day would be in another spot the next. The paths leading toward the statue seemed to subtly change when I wasn't looking. I began to question my sanity. Was I just tired? Was I overthinking things? I couldn't be sure anymore. But it wasn't just the physical changes that were troubling. At night, the island itself felt different. The Statue of Liberty, that towering symbol of freedom, now cast a suffocating presence over the whole island. There was a heaviness in the air, like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And that was when I started hearing the whispers. It started quietly at first, indistinct voices on the wind, like they were calling my name. At first, I thought it was the wind playing tricks on me, but it kept happening. The voices grew louder, clearer, until I could almost hear them forming words. But when I turned around, there was no one there. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. Everywhere I went on the island, I felt eyes on me. Not the eyes of the tourists, but something older, something darker. One afternoon, while the sun was setting, I found myself alone on the observation deck. I had some free time and decided to take a breather. I was lost in thought, staring out at the horizon, when I made a mistake. I looked up at the statue. The moment our gazes locked, I felt it, a sharp, unsettling pull. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. It was like the statue was drawing me in, like its eyes were boring into my soul. I quickly turned away, shaking my head, trying to dismiss the sensation. But that night, everything changed. The next day, I woke up feeling wrong. I felt sick. My skin was pale, and my stomach churned. I tried to push through it, but nothing felt right. It was like my body was rejecting me. I couldn't focus on anything. I felt like I was fading away. It didn't take long for Eliza to notice. She pulled me aside, her face stern, her eyes colder than usual. "You've broken the rules," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "You looked at her. You shouldn't have done that." I tried to brush it off. "It was just a mistake." "I didn't mean to." "No," she interrupted. "It's not just a mistake. You've seen her now. You felt it, haven't you?" I nodded slowly, too scared to speak. "You've been marked," she said quietly. "There's no going back now." Her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to run, but I didn't. Something deep inside told me I couldn't escape. I wasn't sure if I wanted to anymore. It's funny, isn't it? How one bad decision, one moment of weakness, can change everything. But that night, it was more than just weakness. it was curiosity. I should have left when the tour ended. I should have turned around, walked away, and never looked back. But the feeling in the pit of my stomach, that gnawing hunger to understand what was going on, took over. I told myself I was just going to take a quick look. Nothing more. Just a moment to satisfy this unsettling pull that had been growing inside me ever since I started working at the statue. I was alone on the island, it was late, and the sky had already started darkening. The tourists had long gone, and the staff had wrapped up their shifts. It should have been peaceful. But it wasn't. It never was anymore. I stood at the base of the Statue of Liberty, looking up at the enormous figure. The night air was thick, like it was holding its breath. Something was waiting. It was quiet, too quiet. I felt the weight of the island pressing in on me. And that was when I reached out. I touched the base of the statue. In that moment, everything shifted. The world around me began to warp. The ground under my feet started to shake, like the island was alive, like it was reacting to me. I couldn't pull my hand away. I didn't want to. The sky turned a deep, unnatural shade of red, casting everything in a blood-like hue. I heard a voice, a familiar voice, calling my name. Jordan. I whipped around, my breath catching in my throat. It was Tom. Or at least, it looked like Tom. But this wasn't him. Not anymore. His face was pale, too pale, like all the color had been drained from him. His eyes were hollow, deep black pits where his pupils should have been. His movements were jerky, like he was struggling to hold himself together. "You shouldn't have touched her," Tom said, his voice cracked, barely human. "Now it's too late." I tried to step back, but it was like the ground was pulling me in. The earth shook harder, and I felt the air grow heavier. Something deep within the statue stirred, as if it had been waiting. Waiting for me. And then, it happened. The statue, the very symbol of freedom and strength, came to life. I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe the stress was getting to me. But no. This was real. The eyes of the statue, those cold, lifeless eyes, glinted with a strange, otherworldly glow. It wasn't like any light I'd ever seen before. It felt ancient, like it had been waiting there, in the dark, for centuries. The wind picked up, carrying distant voices, whispers, they sounded like whispers. Some of them were familiar, like the voices of people I had known, people I had worked with. But others were strange and unfamiliar, like they were speaking from a place far, far away. Jordan, the voice, almost a growl, came from the statue itself. It wasn't just the wind. The statue, it was talking to me. It was beckoning me, calling me closer. My feet refused to move. It was like something inside me was frozen, rooted to the spot. The ground beneath me cracked open, a deep fissure splitting the island as though it was alive, trying to swallow me whole. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My breath was stuck in my throat. The statue's eyes bored into me, and I felt like I was being judged. Not by the world, but by something older, something far more powerful. I reached for the ground, trying to steady myself, but it felt like the island was pulling at me, tugging me toward the statue. The more I tried to resist, the more the earth seemed to break apart beneath me. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake, a mistake I couldn't undo. I knew I had to get out. I had to escape, but the island wasn't letting me go. Every time I tried to move, the path shifted. The ground twisted and turned, creating a maze of unfamiliar roads. The landmarks I knew so well were now distorted, out of place. The doors that I'd passed through earlier now slammed shut as I neared them. The locks clicked in place as if the island itself was trying to keep me inside. I felt the weight of it all. The isle. The island. The statue. They were alive. And they didn't want me to leave. I tried running. I tried calling for help. But there was no one. There was nothing. I was completely alone. Then, out of nowhere, Eliza appeared. But this wasn't the same Eliza I had met before. Her face was pale, almost translucent. Her eyes were dark, empty sockets, void of any human emotion. She wasn't the stern manager anymore. She was something else. She was something consumed. Eliza. I screamed. Help me. Get me out of here. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, her hands like claws, grasping toward me. I tried to move, but it was as if her very presence had frozen me in place. You can't leave, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. You're already one of us. And then it hit me. The Statue of Liberty wasn't just a monument. It wasn't just a symbol of freedom. It was a prison. A prison for the souls of those who broke the rules. That was why Eliza was like this. That was why Tom had warned me. The statue didn't just watch. It took. It judged. And it consumed. I looked at Eliza, really looked at her, and I saw it. I saw the mark of the statue on her. I saw the hollowed-out look in her eyes, the emptiness inside her. The statue had taken her. It had taken everyone who had come too close, everyone who had dared to break the rules. And now, it was coming for me. I turned to face the statue once more, the overwhelming weight of it crashing down on me. I could see it now, clearer than ever. The eyes were glowing, piercing into me. I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was a part of it. I looked down at my hands. They were changing. They were becoming pale, too pale, as though the life was draining from me. And then I saw it, the reflection in the water at the base of the statue. It wasn't me anymore. My face, my own face, was twisted into something unnatural. Something hollow. The statue had marked me. I stumbled back, my legs shaking. The ground beneath me gave way, and I fell. The island was sinking. Slowly at first, and then faster. The very ground was being consumed by the sea. I could hear the voices now, whispers of the lost, the forgotten. The ones who had come before me. You don't get to leave, I whispered to myself, the last of my strength leaving me. The Statue of Liberty doesn't just watch, it takes, and then, the island disappeared. The sea closed over it, taking everything with it. Only echoes remained. Echoes of those who had broken the rules. And now, the statue would wait again. The island was lost. And so was I.